Hello and welcome to the Kubernetes Case Files commentary. I'm your host, Glen Simon, and I'm joined by my colleague, Myles Gray. Kubernetes Case Files is a kind of a more fun way to talk about app modernization in the context of a fictional detective story. The story plays out over a series of episodes. This is episode, I believe, 3, and we'll continue to talk about in a commentary fashion the topics with each week. So in this latest episode, our detective interrogates someone known as the timekeeper, someone who represents kind of the processes and the program management that can help and sometimes hinder getting things done. So Myles, when we talked about our customer here or company, Legacy Bank, this person known as the timekeeper says that modernizing their bank portal, the customer portal, will take at least 2 years. So does that sound realistic? Is that really kind of what a lot of organizations, the kind of timelines that they deal with when we're talking about app modernization?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of dimensions to it. I think number one is if you continue doing things the way that you already do things, then yeah, certainly years is the timeline that you're looking at. And I think it depends what the company means whenever they talk about app modernization. So are we going to just completely rewrite the thing from scratch? Or are we going to use some of what we already have and layer new functionality on top of it, but built in a different way? So instead of, building everything into our monolithic web app, maybe it's just a single central instance that runs and everything is built into that one project, as it were. There are other ways that you can approach that. You could start splitting things out into smaller services. So say, for example, your mobile app, right? That needs to talk to an API somewhere. So the API for that mobile app, or even a portion of the mobile app, is a separate project, but it can still talk to what you've already built. So you don't need to throw everything out and start from scratch to do app modernization. You can layer it to begin with, and then over time, chip away at the foundation. But as far as timelines are sort of concerned with this, obviously it's very case dependent. What are the dependencies of that particular application? But whenever it comes to adding new functionality, if you add it in a layered fashion where you're exposing new functionality through a new development paradigm, maybe you start embracing things like CI and CD and a bit more of an agile approach, I would say it's more realistic to say, yeah, we could look at months as like the first thing, and then it will pick up speed over time. But if you want to just rewrite everything from scratch, then yeah, obviously that's a bigger endeavor.
And yeah, you touched on monolithic apps, and I guess from the term monolithic, it sounds like that your ability to kind of make incremental changes is maybe limited or is different in that type of scenario.
Yeah, so monolithic apps, they do have some good use cases, right? For example, Microsoft SQL Server, Oracle RAC, you kind of want those to be microservices, you kind of want those to be monoliths, because monoliths are inherently tightly coupled together, which generally means that they're more performant, they're a little bit faster, and that matters for like high performance database access type stuff. It's not always the case, but usually it's a good fit for that kind of thing. Whenever we start talking about monoliths to do with sort of user-facing services, though, the need for it to be a monolith becomes less and less, because it's mainly just, this is the way we've always built things. So that's the way we built this. We've still got a monolith. And as you say, a monolith is what it sounds like. It's one of these big, megalithic temple type things, where there's a million cards stacked one on top of each other to make everything run. And there's only maybe 1 or 2 people in the entire company that know how this thing works end to end, or maybe there isn't even any, because these things are usually built over years and years and years. And making changes to a monolith, because they are mono, there is a single instance of it, and usually a single instance of it. That means if you want to make a little change to a portion of it, you can't just make a little change to a portion of it. You have to change the little portion, but you have to deploy the entire thing to deploy that little change. And that usually means that people are a lot more hesitant to roll out new changes, experimental features, that kind of stuff, because, well, what if it breaks X, or what if it breaks Y? And, the interoperability especially as a monolith grows, gets more and more complex. That's not to say all the complexity goes away with microservices, but the delineation between who is responsible for what breaking is a much, much easier thing to talk about whenever you start looking at microservices and other kinds of architectures. Also, the development cycle and testing cycle for monoliths is generally much longer, and you have to spend a lot more time in test, because if you edit something, you're not just changing that little component, you're essentially touching the whole stack, so it means that it has to go through a lot more testing as well.
I see. Okay, so it sounds like that for Legacy Bank, one of, to really kind of to improve these timelines, at least maybe not initially, maybe there's some additional or some initial investment that needs to go in, but eventually maybe they can get to a point where they're able to do these updates more quickly. So, but maybe part of the solution here is to kind of figure out, what should be monolithic and maybe what should be moved into more of a modern app style of development. All right, well, thanks for that, Myles, and thank you everyone for joining us for this episode of Kubernetes Kase Files Commentary, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.